I just love Nick's eyes. He's just like, you trust me? It's like Aladdin offering his hand to Jasmine. Do you trust me? And she's like, yes, I do. But anyways. Welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you are wondering who we are to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training in both solo and partner dances. She has about 21 and I have about 23 years. So we try to keep things pretty scientifically based here. We try to keep our opinions out of it for the most part. We're really just looking at what's happening between two people. So that being said, we are looking at two dances tonight, both from Swingtacular last year, because apparently that's what I was feeling.
We've been watching a lot of Swingtacular dances recently, and I'm okay with it.
Unintentionally.
I know. I think we're all just sad because we couldn't physically be there again last month. So the topic for tonight is lateral versus linear connection. The first video we're watching is of Nick King and Courtney Adair from Swingtacular. I am dropping the link in the chat now. Go ahead and give it a watch, and when you're done, we will get to analyzing. To the screen share. Tonight, we're talking about linear versus lateral connection, and we want to explain what we mean by that really quick. So if we have a bird's eye view of a slot, here's our slot. Linear is connection that goes parallel to the direction of the slot, either tension away or compression inwards, whereas lateral connection is connection that goes perpendicular to the slot or some other variation thereof. You can also hear lateral connection referred to as rotational.
Yeah.
But we'll get into the more nuances of that later. As always, if you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, on with the show.
Yes. We're first looking at really the handhold that is happening. And you can really see, so first of all, Nick has his hand up on top of Courtney's. So it makes it easier to change the direction of the connection a little bit. And you can see that we're going side to side here, right? So it's a little bit hard to see from this angle, but you can also see he's adding in some rotation to it. So as he's flipping his arm from palm up to palm down, you can see it's slightly moving across the body, and that's what's causing Courtney to rotate. And what I want to make sure to note here is that it isn't going to be like connection side to side the whole time necessarily. There's a good chance that it's going into more of a neutral moment until it's coming back like in the rainbow, like on the ends. It's going to be more connected than up on the top of the arc, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
Onward to the sugar push of death. One of the things I want to talk about in this is one of the ways you can help create stability is kind of like locking down one of the planes of connection. Mm-hmm. And so this is almost purely linear connection, parallel to the slot. Mm-hmm. And compression based, and making it almost solely linear helps add stability to it, because then there isn't any wobbling to the side because they're focusing on just that single direction. Mm-hmm.
I also want to quickly address like how we're getting into this position here. I know it's not entirely related to just like the linear connection. So at the start here, Nick is bringing the arm towards him, and Courtney is reaching in, but she's not actually like really connecting in. Like she's not giving any of her weight, which is why we get this position right here, where she is really bent into that left leg, and her right foot is really far behind her. And so what he's doing to encourage her to like give that weight is he is extending her arm farther. And so that's drawing her farther past her like center.
And then I also really appreciate how he's offering his left arm early. He's like, this is here for you to fall onto. I got you. And then minor note, just Nick's line right here with his left leg. Gorgeous.
Yes, very nice. I also just noticed that he's like sliding his right foot slightly outward as he's like,
oh yeah, he is
encouraging her.
Like, come to me.
But he's stopping before he needs to support her weight.
Yeah.
Because we want that stability, as we were saying.
Yep. So I want to talk about this moment through here as they move into this anchor, because Nick is encouraging and allowing Courtney to play inside this extended anchor. And he's using not just linear, but also lateral connection to allow that to happen, because you can see through Courtney's body that she's also shaping in some rotation. So right here, her left shoulder comes back a little bit, and then her left shoulder comes forward. And so she's rotating, and that's coming from the handhold, not just moving up and down the slot, but also perpendicular across the slot. And it's arcing through those positions. And that's what's allowing it to be comfortable, because it would be an entirely different feeling for Courtney if Nick was encouraging purely a linear connection through this moment.
Yeah, so we're looking at like the beginning and then continuing through really into this telemark here, which is that rotational energy that we were talking about earlier that you can kind of like, you know, hear a lot of times, which is just the same as the lateral, really. Same thing. So, but what we're seeing here is that it's really moving from like lateral to linear and back, just based on where they're at position wise in this. So the majority of it is going to be the lateral movement, however, and that's starting at the prep when Nick is wrapping that arm around her back, and then he is using the inside of that arm to help redirect her around him.
We're probably someday going to do an entire episode on telemarks, because I love them. But while we're here, I just want to point out how lovely of a job Nick is doing of bringing Courtney's right arm into his space so she can have an extended frame. That's a really important detail on a telemark when you're really kind of stepping into the follow space. You don't want to make them collapse their frame or hurt their shoulder in any way. You want to keep them stable. So as a leader, you're the one that absorbs into your space to keep your follow comfortable. Now, I want to talk about what's actually happening in a leader's right hand in closed position a lot of the time. So if we think of, this is an imperfect sketch, but it will serve our purposes. Bird's eye view of a follow's rib cage. And then we have a leader's hand around this side, right? And right here is the knuckles, and right here is the wrist. So your palm is kind of on both sides of the follow's rib cage. You don't just have the palm on the side. The palm also kind of wraps around at the knuckles.
Right.
So what you have is actually two directions in which you can have connection. You have the linear and you have the lateral. And so, really hugging the corner of the follow's ribcage with your right hand as a leader is really important. So you can get that compression into your hand in both of those directions, both linearly parallel to the slot and laterally perpendicular to the slot with rotation. And I feel like that's something that gets lost in translation a lot, that you need to be able, as a leader, to feel both of those directions of connection based on how your hand is placed on a follow's rib cage. End soapbox.
I want to add to what you just said and say that because you see at the very beginning that Nick is bringing like the majority of his arm like around her. And so rather than, because you can see his hand is in the middle of her back. And so like Cassie was just saying, you know, there's still that connection point in two places, but it's just a larger area that he's using. So rather than it just being kind of like the hand area, it's the hand is on the back and then it's like the forearm and like, you know, arm area that is on the other side.
Yep.
So same concept, even though it looks a little different.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the time he gets to here, the heel of his palm is on the side of her ribs. Because to prep a follow properly, again, we should probably do a dedicated episode on this, but to prep a follow properly with the closed position handhold, your right hand as a leader, for this prep to an inside turn out of closed position requires some wrist magic. We've talked about elbow magic, but this involves some wrist magic.
Funny enough, we talked about elbow magic about Nick as well. Anywho.
Oh, hey. Nick, your magic. Anyways, onward. So coming out of this underarm turn, Nick and Courtney progress their slot towards the judges. And this involves having lateral connection through the handhold. And it also, like Alicia was talking about earlier in the dance, there are moments of neutral through here. But I wanted to highlight the way Nick preps for it.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't just try to pull Courtney in the direction of the judges. He's not like sending his left hand off to his left and is like, go this way. We've all looked at the hand moving away from us and gone, no.
I think that means I should be moving.
But I don't want to work that hard. Instead, he does this prep. So like they're connected enough here that they're able to both take this wide side step together. But by lifting the handhold a little bit, it's indicating to Courtney that something more is going to happen. And he's using that to help her really like lift her center up so that they both do that collect and weight displacement with their feet. Like it's just so well done.
Yeah, Nick is somebody that's really good at using like that lateral movement, and you can very clearly see it with him.
Yeah. It's funny, when Alicia was asking me when we were planning for this episode, she's like, so what exactly overall do you want to talk about? Because we haven't picked videos yet. And I was like, well, I think it's mainly going to be me ranting that, oh, look, here's lateral connection. Oh, look, here's lateral connection. Oh, look, here's lateral connection. Because I feel like not enough people truly appreciate just how much lateral connection there is in West Coast swing, because we tend to so heavily focus on the linear.
Yeah.
And And just like with your basic tension and compression, there are degrees of how much weight can be in that lateral connection. So this, for instance, looks really light. And I know Miles and Tessa often talk about your baseline being like just enough pressure to like depress your nose if you were to touch the tip of your nose and to squish it. That's kind of like your baseline for lateral connection. But it can increase from there. Personally, because I'm a larger person, I love having a really heavy lateral connection in addition to heavier compression and tension because it just adds to the communication.
Yeah.
So this is another similar moment of a lateral like sidestep through the count 4 of an underarm turn. But I just really appreciate the angle that we have from the camera of Courtney for this.
Yeah.
So it's a similar sidestep, a displacement underneath, and then another sidestep. And then it's that twist right there at the end, that rotation, because Courtney is moving laterally into the connection. The outside of her right hand is running into Nick's hand. And then Nick is tethering that connection and he's transitioning it from lateral to linear. And it's that transition between the two that allows this to happen, where Courtney's right shoulder comes forward, her left shoulder comes back, and she steps underneath herself. And that's because of the transition from lateral to linear. We should spend a whole month in our Patreon on tethering.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Yes, it would. I think this was one you wanted to talk about. Let me know if the... Oh, yes, this thing.
So wanted to look at just the connection here on this like weight supported plank. I love that she just like touches the ground.
No, it's like boop.
Going into this is interesting because we're starting, he's leading her forward and then he's catching her, and what's happening, you can see he's having to rotate her, and so we're using that lateral movement, and then as he sets her, right, so he's rotating her and then he's placing the feet where he wants the feet to stay, and then as he like not as but after he does that, it's then changing to that more linear, because you can really see that he is moving her off of her feet and bringing her forward basically. And this also has, you know, that connection downward because she's dropping, but he's bringing her down the slot, that upper body, in order to plank her.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like, if you really watch Nick's left hand on Courtney's left arm, so he hooks his fingers over the top.
Yeah.
And then right here, I think he's actually letting the outside of her arm run into his chest. And that's what's creating that lateral stability after to dissolve the rotation to transition it into linear. I love how she does her fingers too. Just
I know.
right there. It's like, yes, I will just also do glorious finger dancing at the same time while my entire spine is in peril.
But then once he brings her up out of that, so as he puts her down and then brings her back up, that's all of the linear connection. It happens as she's going down and coming back up. But then once again, because we're wanting her to rotate out of it to get back to facing him, right? We're changing into that lateral connection again to like bring it into like a circle to move her around.
Yep. that bird's eye view that I was talking about, the follows rib cage and where the leader's hand is. I want to demonstrate with my actual right hand. So this is the follows back. This is the side of the follows rib cage. From the front, if they are shorter than me, my fingers will tip a little bit. And if my follow is taller than me, my fingers will sometimes even go all the way up. And I'll think of actually letting the bottom of their scapula actually sit down into this crevice in my palm. And you can kind of also bend here to get that same feeling. So wrapping around and getting both sides of the follows rib cage in closed position into your right hand as a leader, super duper important.
Mm-hmm.
So our next video for this evening, also from Swingtacular 2019,
Shocker.
we're in a mood, is Jordan Frisbee and Alyssa Glanvill. Go ahead and give it a watch. To the screen share.
Yeah, so basically, just kind of looking here, we're starting out with both some lateral and linear movement, right? So we can see that they're taking steps to the side, and really, like, whenever you're seeing a step to the side, there's going to be some lateral movement like involved. Like, it's lateral connection is what I mean, not movement. Clearly you can see the lateral movement happening.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's really hard to see the connection that's happening laterally, but there is. And in this specifically, it's kind of like what we were just talking about with Nick, where he kind of has the arm is what's kind of helping the lateral, and then he has the hand closer to the back for that catch to change it to linear.
Alyssa is also helping with the, are we going to call it the middle school slow dance connection?
Yeah,
because both of her forearms are up across his shoulders.
Yeah.
And so she's probably applying some pressure, not only downwards, but also inwards to connect with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then this part here. So we have this sugar push. So many frames. My poor little finger. Into this double resistance in this anchor.
Mm-hmm.
But right through here, there's a lot of combined, almost simultaneous linear and lateral because of the angles that they're in. And that's all happening because of how Jordan is manipulating not only where his hand is in space, because that's how he's leading Alyssa, but also by how his knuckles and his wrist are flexing and straightening at any given point.
Yeah.
Because when we watch a pattern like this, yes, we see this handhold. And yes, this handhold is important for the compression part of this pattern. But afterwards, as soon as that compression is released, this handhold is an accessory to the connection. It is kind of like the training wheels on a bicycle for the connection, because the brunt of the work is happening in Jordan's right hand.
Yeah.
And because I haven't used this buzzword in a while, and we've got some new subscribers. Hello, new subscribers. In closed position as a leader, the center counterpoint of the connection is the leader's right elbow. So you can see his right elbow isn't traveling as much through space, but instead his body and his hand are moving towards and away that point in the space where his elbow is.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a boomerang.
I know.
But so through there, you not only have a complex center counterpoint of Jordan's right elbow, but you also have combined linear and lateral connection in his right hand wrapping around Alyssa's back. So you've got linear through her back and lateral through the sides of her ribs.
Mm-hmm. I want to just look at the hands for a second, because you can see that even though that's not the main point of connection, but you can really see that there is that, more lateral connection because of like where Jordan's hand is at. So it starts kind of more in front of his body, and it's extended forward a little bit, but then he brings it into himself. But that's really like where you can see that's changing the angle. So having some like slight pressure there, but then just the way that he is bringing that hand in closer to him, it's creating that lateral movement.
Oh, yes. So this is another instance of like transition between the two, creating shaping. So if we look at this point in time, Alyssa is over-rotated on her anchor because she styled and she did an awesome, cool thing. So as she is rotating back to face Jordan, that rotation to her right and kind of pulling into the pocket of her right shoulder to connect with Jordan creates a lateral connection. He's leading linear, but she decides to respond lateral in order to delay her weight transfer forward and continue playing.
Yeah.
And so it's not only possible for the leader to play with transitioning between the two to change things up, it's also the follow's prerogative to play with that as well, to help communicate to the leader that they want to do something different. So similar to the weight support between Nick and Courtney, at least I'm saying the correct names tonight.
Yeah.
Unlike, oh man. Anyways, this is actually really helpful because this is almost a similar setup, just in cross hands to the way Nick was leading Courtney in that sugar push of death in the previous dance. But again, they're taking out variables and focusing almost exclusively on the linear to create stability so that they're only having to manage absorption and redirection in one direction instead of multiple. Because, for instance, if they were to add rotation to this all of a sudden, it would up the complexity, not just double, but significantly more so.
Mm-hmm.
The same way that I really appreciated how Nick was offering his second hand for stability, Jordan does the same thing. He's reaching his left hand to Alyssa's hips. The heel of his hand is catching her hips, and then she's reaching across to his wrist for added stability. All right, now we have a lateral tethered open whip. I feel like I should have like a PhD to say that sentence. I'm not being pretentious, I swear. So Jordan rotates into this. And so it starts by being very linear because Alyssa is being drawn almost exclusively down the slot. But after this point, because Jordan is continuing to rotate to his left and his right hand, which has Alyssa's right hand, is attached to his right shoulder, essentially, his right shoulder is going to make a U-turn through space. And so that's creating a rotational tether that is encouraging Alyssa to move around him. And so that tethered effect can have the weight and feel of a linear connection, but because it's rotational, it's also lateral.
A lot happening.
It's a lot. And it feels so good. I love tethered rotation. It's my jam.
When it's done right, it's very nice.
Yes. When not, it's quite horrifying.
Erin said, how do you do the tethering correctly?
All right. So this comes from focusing on yourself as a leader. Yeah. So you can see that Jordan is starting by keeping it very linear. So he's absorbing his right elbow past his ribcage towards us. So that way, Alyssa, for her 1-2, is getting a very linear, very straight direction. And then once she's close enough that the tension has kind of released in the handhold, he brings his right hand up to his right shoulder. And at this point, he basically attaches their handhold to his shoulder. And all he has to do is have a really strong grounded rotation. Mm-hmm. Right there. So he's doing a delayed weight transfer onto his right foot. You can see how his right foot is far out ahead of his center. He's catching his weight and pivoting to his left as he turns onto it. And you can see how his right hand is just attached to his shoulder. So from a bird's eye view, I really like the bird's eye views. They're quite helpful. So from a bird's eye view, the handhold went this way, down this side of the slot, and then very suddenly did a U-turn through space. And it's that crossing of the slot that is really important, because you wouldn't get the same effect if it went this way and then suddenly went that way. It has to go this way, cross the slot, and go that way, but in an arc.
Yeah.
And remember, bird's eye view. This is not an up and down situation. This is a z-axis situation. And it's that U-turn from a bird's eye view that's creating the lateral tether. Mm-hmm. And I think you wanted to talk about Alyssa's exit.
It did. So really, I mean, we're already kind of changing that connection as she arcs around. So because she's needing to come forward, we're changing it to a little bit linear. However, what happens is she ends up angling herself, and that creates a more lateral connection, even though she was just being led in a linear fashion to bring her back in front of him. And as you can see, I mean, like, Jordan leans away from her as well. So you're having that away connection at like an angle here.
One last thing I want to mention, because this is just a symptom of the physics of doing this correctly. Yeah. Because of the bird's eye view U-turn that I just talked about, and the way Jordan has to do a delayed weight transfer and catch his weight, that's creating a really severe forward pitch for him, which is very necessary to create the correct effect in the lead. But because of that, Alyssa is attached to his right shoulder, which is over this point in space, and she is shorter than he is, which is forcing her into a parallel, almost parallel forward pitch and a very extended arm. So something to keep in mind as a leader, that yes, you're going to put the follow into this position, and that's not wrong. You just need to be cognizant that that's the position you're putting them in when you lead something like this, that they are going to be more forward pitched and more extended in their frame. And to be aware of that, so when you lead the exit from this position, that you're still taking care of them, because they are more vulnerable to either being hurt or just something going wonky when they're in this kind of position. So again, it's not wrong that the follow is in this position. It's just a natural consequence of the physics of how this pattern is led. I just want leaders to understand that that's what's happening to the follow on the other end of this connection.
Yeah.
To react to it appropriately out the other end. And that's one of the reasons why Jordan ends up just maintaining a center counterpoint, essentially, with the handhold, and he moves away from it. He's like, okay, Alyssa, how do you want to resolve what I just put you through? And that's how he's choosing to resolve it. He's like, okay, I'm going to remove variables and give you more of your control back. I love that kind of stuff. Personally, as a leader and as a follower, I like it when the leader leads something super complex that has the possibility of just throwing the follow off kilter, just because that's what physics do, to give the follow an extra bit of time and breathing space to resolve it how they so choose. And that often, especially the more advanced you and your partner are, will lead to cooler things. So that's how this passing tuck ends up happening. And Alyssa is able to dance it.
Starting out in this tuck position here. And then as you can see, Alyssa rotates to the side. And so she's now kind of open towards the audience, but she's like using that connection and playing around with it. And she's changing it around so that she can angle herself differently. So even though she's still kind of pressing a little bit linear into the hand, it's not really, that connection is going to be at more of an angle. What I would guess that connection is feeling like is there's more pressure in one spot of like the palm than another.
I would agree.
So even though it looks like she's kind of pressing forward into it, it's not going to be equal pressure everywhere like it would be if you were just pressing straight forward.
Yep. And then I want to point out how at the beginning, because this is a really interesting section musically, because they take the thing that they're doing and then they continue to do it and then they accelerate it.
Yeah.
And while these kind of rotational back and forths are just starting, Jordan is transitioning between which hand has the dominant connection.
Yeah.
So when Alyssa is rotated to her left, the dominant connection is in Jordan's right hand. Right here, it transitions just a little bit. There's a little bit more connection in the open hand hold. And the only reason I say that is because it looks like the way Jordan's wrist is in this position is weaker just because of the shape his wrist is in. So there's still connection there, but he's using the lateral connection in the open hand hold to really, as a guardrail, to ricochet off of. So then they bounce back.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of like taught. It's almost like, I'm sorry, Alyssa, be okay with this analogy. It's almost like she's a basketball and he's tossing her between his hands. And that's the beginning of this. But then as he increases in speed, he uses both of his hands equally to create that really fast back and forth.
Yeah.
So like right here, you can see there's like an equal and opposite. As his left arm extends, his right arm is retracting and that kind of a thing. And basically, the faster you want something to happen, the more stability you need to add as a leader out the other side. Because you need to not let the follow have the opportunity to dissipate something. Because if we can dissipate something, we will. That doesn't sound nefarious at all.
And yet, true.
Right. And we are to our last one. I just wanted to talk about this double resistance right here at the end of this pattern, because they catch in linear, because you can very much see that they are hitting tension away from each other.
Mm-hmm.
But then instead of coming back into linear, they both added rotation, kind of like Lindy swivels, to the compression. So it's an actual rotational form of compression and therefore lateral.
Mm-hmm.
And then it rotates back and transitions from that lateral back into linear.
Yeah.
You do see actually very commonly double resistance occurring purely in a linear direction, away towards away. But I also love when you add a lateral connection to it with like a swivel or some other form of rotation, and understanding how to navigate this transition from linear and then relaxing the hands down as you rotate and your inner hips come towards your partner is really important, because it's very common for leaders to see this and think this means pull the hand down right here.
Right.
But that's not what's happening. What's happening is first, their centers are moving back towards each other, and their hips are rotating and their hips are getting closer together. And it's because the proximity, that closeness is happening first, that allows the hands to relax down.
Yeah.
So whenever you hear a teacher saying the hands relax down, it's because you've gotten close enough to each other first. The order of operations is opposite from what you think. You get close, then the hand goes down because they can relax, as opposed to you pull the hands down so you can be closer. Really important distinction. And as a tall follow, I got feelings about that one. Speaking of which, we are in the process of planning our tall follow panel, which will hopefully be in about a month. Quite excited.
But before that, we have Dumont.
1 week from tonight.
Next week.
We're going to be discussing his wonderful classic routine with Chantal Pianetta, and also his Strictly dance with Lisa Picard from Rose City Swing.
Basically, we're just going to be talking to him about musicality, just because we know that he has quite a extensive music background. So I thought it would be a really good topic to talk with him about. And I know we're going to do a little, Q&A session like we normally do, but we do have some kind of different questions for him specifically. So
any questions about lateral linear connection? I feel like when you call lateral connection rotational, that can be helpful in certain instances. However, it doesn't include a lot of the things that happen in lateral connection. So that's why we wanted to use that word specifically, and then amend with the word rotational when rotational things were happening.
Yeah. And rotational tends to be more with spins, and it's not necessarily like, it's not the only thing that can happen for it to change from linear.
Yep.
I think the last thing I want to say is that, that's something that happens at, really high levels, and it is really hard to see unless you're looking for it a lot of the time. So like, with like rotational turns and stuff, like that's something that you can very easily see, but it's really hard a lot of the times to see the difference between, a slight shift in if it's like towards the outside of the hand, or, inside, whatever, versus like just normal stretch connection. It can be very minimal, like change, but it really depends on like the direction people are moving, and multiple variables happen, but it is something that's a lot harder to see.
One of the things that I think happens is you see all this wonderful shaping out of the people that you look up to and you want to learn from. But you don't realize that so much of that shaping is a direct result of the connection. The shaping is happening afterward and because of something that just happened in the connection. And a lot of the times I see more novice dancers or even intermediate dancers focusing on the shaping over the connection. And this is one of the things that bothers me, because some people say you can't see connection, but if you understand the timing of how connection works and the order of operations, what comes first, there will be a natural cause and effect to that order of operations that is natural and works within the physics of West Coast swing. And so that's why I wanted to highlight this, particularly that one moment of Courtney where the camera was almost like directly behind her back as she was strafing laterally into the connection. And then that connection was transitioning from lateral to linear, and you could see her shape through that. Her shaping was a direct reaction. It was an effect caused by that lateral connection that was happening beforehand. And flashing lights, really, really important.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of doing a month on tethering in our Patreon.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. We should.
Yeah. Yes.
I actually had one that just slipped into my head just now. So for like beginning or ish dancers, what do we focus on to get to that shaping then? Because like you said, it's like a lot of people see it, oh my god, that's so cool, and then they jump that. So it's like in an ideal progression, like if there was any, like what's the best way to start? Is it start with a connection and just figure out where things go from there, or is like,
do you want to take us, or shall I?
You can.
All right. But yeah, no, I agree. You want to first focus on really clean, really connected basics. And then from there, I would say progress to basics that you are able to, especially as a leader, lead variations of, even with follows who are more novice than you, because it's really indicative of being able to lead well that you can lead someone with less skill than you in the same things that you would a higher level follow. So really understanding how the connection is supposed to feel and function will then almost allow the shaping to happen naturally. You don't actually have to think about it. And that's where your foundation of shaping comes from, because it's really what I love about West Coast swing is so much of the movement is really physics based. It's cause and effect. It's natural human body mechanics. And then from that point forward, once you understand the connection and your body is creating the physics of that connection correctly, then you can notice, oh, what specifically is my body doing? Because this is where variations happen among the dancers that make them unique. So the physics are happening slightly differently from person to person, and then they take that and they decide what they want to add to it to make it look more extreme isn't quite the right word, but to like turn up the volume on what their body is already doing. So like for instance, if we take Courtney's anchor that I was just talking about, that shaping was very, very gentle through her body, whereas Alyssa tends to take that same movement but turn up the volume on it a lot more. So yeah, good connection, good physics, your body will naturally start shaping correctly, and then you just decide how you want to turn up the volume on it to get the right aesthetic that you want for who you are as an individual.
I think what I want to add to that is, so the main thing that happens when like we're talking about shaping that it's happening without there being a connection. So it's just like you're disconnecting and then creating the shape rather than being connected and then shaping something while you're staying connected. So really the idea is to stay connected the whole time and not to disconnect with, your partner. And that's what's going to help. like that shaping. And, you know, like you can create different things. A lot of it will come naturally just based on, you know, what you're doing already. But like, if you're going to go through and start creating all of that, it needs to come from a place of connection. And so if you are starting to play with something and you realize that you're going to disconnect, like you get to an angle that, you know, your shoulder is like back behind you or something, like that's the point where you need to stop, right? So right before that is going to be that most extreme point of shaping for that position that you're in. Is right before you get into a spot where you're going to be disconnected.
And then that being said, the more advanced you get, the more license you have to disconnect and shape, either because it's a necessity because of the division you're competing in, and whoever you draw doesn't necessarily isn't at your level, or something is odd is happening in the connection, but you still want to show yourself off. That's an opportunity to strategically disconnect in order to demonstrate to the judges what you're capable of. But that being said, to get to that point, you need to understand the physics of it first to be able to still make it look natural and make it look like it was caused by the connection. See, that's the trick. Like, because you need to be able to pull off the illusion that the connection is a dream and your shaping is affected by that connection, and it's a result of the connection. So, and it's not a disembodied wiggle. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. The one really good example that you can like kind of see for all of that is if you go and watch like an All-American and you see like a pro draw somebody that's like novice or intermediate, right? Sometimes they're going to disconnect, but it won't look like it necessarily unless you're really looking at what's happening. And that's not because they're, you know, trying to disconnect, they don't enjoy the dance or something. It's to correct something or prevent, you know, something that might be harmful, you know, injury wise or something like that. So if you're kind of looking for an example of like making it look nice, but it's kind of disconnecting, those are good things to like watch for is during those like All-American or pro-am of some sort.
Yeah, I think there's one video in particular that we've watched a few times, not on this show, but Alicia and I have talked about. Larissa at Atlanta Swing Classic. I think it was a spotlighted All-American final, and the way she handled that situation was excellent. Did that help, Erin? Excellent. Thank you for that wonderful question.
Yeah. If there's nothing else, thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next week, hopefully.
With Christopher Dumont.
Bye, guys.
Bye. A really important distinction, because double resistance does happen in purely lineal. That's new. Literal, the combination between lateral and linear. You heard it here first. Copyright Cassie Winter 2020. I should probably put my beverage down before I start gesticulating, especially since it's a precariously narrow can. I love these dry sodas, ginger flavor, quite refreshing, but it's so narrow. I have 2 cats. It's anxiety inducing.
Perfect size for them to just slowly slide off.
Oh, don't say that. Don't say that.
Sliding through. You know what? Framing through Nick's spaces are a very close second to framing through Chris's spaces.
It's great. I particularly love his like grandpa style wide leg forward scoot. Is there any other way to name that?
Nope, think that's perfect. I literally just watched him do that.
He's got a crick in his back and sciatica at the same time.
He's having all the problems.
To the screen share. I don't know. I still can't find a good sound effect. It's sad. So I do it myself, which is sad
I think that's the one. I think you just doing it yourself. I think that's what it is.
That's like our Bailey Sarian theme song.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Stability is king.
Mhm.
Sorry. My jokes are horrible when I'm tired. I am so sorry. I bet he would have liked it though, so it's fine. I just realized that Larissa is feeling whatever is going on.
Yeah.
Like, yes. What? That's a dot. That's no. I have the square thing on. There we go. Why did they both start with L's?
I know. I keep thinking, like, am I saying the right one?
Anxiety.
In order to plank her. Sounds really weird.
It does. It's a new way to use that as a verb.
Uh-huh. Or linear. What word am I looking for?
Lateral, linear, rotational.
Linear is the word that there's another word that I want that I'm not finding. Anyways, makes me think of the T-Bolt and Arena video that we're planning on looking at, like the very end of it.
Oh yeah, that ride to end all rides.
Yeah. With a barrel roll of some sort included.
I'm always like, barrel roll used with extreme caution, and Tebow's like, hold my beer.
Pretty much.
I'm starting to wonder if my apartment is haunted. I keep hearing the weirdest noises tonight.
It just suddenly became haunted.
I know. I'm really glad I'm not alone with my thoughts right now.
There was about half a second there when you were talking, then I was like, who have you let that's taller than you? But then I remembered multiple stories that you've told me about Nick. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Funny story. When you're a woman who also leads, the champion leaders sometimes get really excited about it, and they'll ask you to dance, and you'll be following, having a grand old time. It's like, oh, champion asked her to dance. And then suddenly, you'll be leading them. And it wasn't, they didn't necessarily ask. They're just suddenly in the follow position. And you're like, okay, I guess this is my life now. But Nick, bless his soul, has done that to me several times. Not in recent years, because I think he's since learned that, oh, maybe she doesn't like that.
You never know.
You never know. Like, I enjoy leading, but I'm a follow first. I'm follow dominant.
Yeah.
Her hair gives me Charlotte Bot vibes in this video for some reason.
Yeah, because it just like immediately goes back to being perfect.
I know.
Yeah.
Ultimate hair envy. That's when you know you're a champ follow. It's when you have the best hair. Tell me I'm wrong.